everyone, and welcome back to Coffee Commerce Cabernet. My name's Destaney.
My name is Gabi.
Gabi, where are we today?
We are in this wonderful studio called Echo Town Recording Studio in Dorset in the south of England, about 4-minute drive away from my sister's house over the holiday season.
It's chilly.
It's a little chilly billy, which is why we're wearing fur coats inside. They're faux, Mum. Yes, we thought we'd grab the opportunity to hop on a podcast whilst we were traveling around England together and thought we'd chat a little bit about sport today.
Yeah, this has actually been a requested topic for us. The actual episode title that we're diving into is How Athletics Built the Woman We Are Today. And what we're really wanting to talk about is the bridge between being a high-performance athlete and where we are today in terms of career, leadership, and just the success that we have seen individually.
Yeah. What do we have in our cups today? It's not Cabernet. We are chilly, so...
We do not have Cabernet. I think this is our first episode where we're actually drinking coffee.
Yes.
So it better be a good one.
Got a little Nespresso in my cup.
I just have really toasty coffee. Is it Nespresso?
Yeah, to warm up our fingers.
Yes. Amazing. Well, before we dive in, let's actually kind of give the listener some context on why this has been such a requested topic for us. Gabi, do you want to give a little bit of backstory on how athletics impacted your childhood?
Yeah, it's, I would say it kind of defined my childhood. Much of the first 20, 25 years of my life or so, I was a professional water skier, ate, slept and dreamt water skiing and this high performance athlete era of my life. Probably from the age of 8, I think I really started to get into it, but I was representing my country by the age of 10. So it very much defined who I was, how I showed up. My friends who went to middle school, high school with me know that I was really not there a lot and had to take school exams overseas with moderators and whatnot. It was an all-encompassing period of my life.
Which is incredible. I mean, started at 8, representing your country in 2 years.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because there weren't that many athletes, but I'll take the win. And then, many years of breaking a lot of records and getting up to the world stage. It took me around the world to travel in some incredible countries and compete on the biggest stages or the roughest lakes or rivers around the world, and incredibly appreciative for the lessons that I learned during that era. And that's really, I think, a huge defining factor of how I show up still today.
I heard that you had the opportunity to water ski with a hippo.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Thanks, Dad. So growing up in South Africa, crocodiles, hippos, look, they weren't typically supposed to be in the lakes that we were training in, but I couldn't take more than...
Don't fall.
Yeah, don't fall. Make sure you get up real quick. There was one incident where the lake that I used to always train in, it bordered a reserve that had hippos, and there was a rogue male juvenile hippo that had broken through the fence, and we had heard that it had gotten into the lake, but after about a week we figured, they've probably caught it by now, right?
That's good.
Yeah, so my dad didn't want me to have less, any more time taken off from training, I suppose. We probably had a big tournament coming up, and so went back into the lake. And then only the week later had they caught the hippo. So I didn't have any encounters with it, but I have absolutely also skied during the South African National Championships with crocodiles that broke through a border. And that was another incident.
Yeah. Wow.
I ended up with all my fingers and all my toes through all of those.
Extreme water skiing.
Yeah. Water skiing is an extreme sport.
I love it. That being said, when we talk about athletics and how early we got started, I had a similar background in terms of being thrown in, I think, to competitive travel sports at around 8 or 10 as well. I was, practicing multiple times a week, and then I continued to play multiple travel sports, like simultaneously balancing a job at 16, traveling for dual sports, and then also playing 3 high school sports. It was kind of just balance everything and figure it out. But when I think back, are there any like key defining moments that you would say like this is your villain story or your origin story for that background?
I would say, I don't know that my villain story, but
I
my
would.
oh right, okay. I would say it was when I flew up to, so I was from Cape Town, South Africa, and remember getting on the plane to fly 2 hours to go to Johannesburg. And my dad had said, one day when you're good enough, you'll get to go to Johannesburg for water skiing. And little do I know, it took me to many other countries after that. But that first time flying up to Johannesburg for a first little competition, and we were trying out a boat, and I hadn't really skied in a slalom course all that much. That was my particular discipline. And the first time going through the course, I ran the course, I completed it. And I was 8 at that age. And everyone in the boat sort of looked around and they said, I think we've got something here. I don't know. They just told me to run the course, so I ran the course. And I guess I was kind of good at it that first time. And I very much remember that feeling of, wow, big pride in achieving something. And that's definitely been a core thing that's gone through the rest of my life. But that moment, I was so young, but the external validation that I got was
just reading their energy of how impressed they were when you were just like, oh, I just did it. I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't really, it definitely was an internal thing. It was definitely the external validation.
I had a very different moment, and I think it kind of describes what we'll get into a little bit later. But when asked this question of like, what is the story of you as a child that kind of really defines the origin story for you?
Yeah.
I remember we had like a family party. It was someone's birthday or a holiday party or something. And my dad had me outside practicing pitching at the time. And he had, set a ridiculous rule of like how many strikes he wanted me to throw in a certain period. And he was like, you need to get the reps in. My dad was very big on like practice makes perfect. Mm-hmm. Like he would print off these little papers and hang them on my door and just practice. And all of my family showed up, but I still hadn't hit the number of strikes I was supposed to throw. And they were inside celebrating, and it started pouring rain on me. And I asked my dad if I could come in. He was like, no, you need to hit the number of strikes that you need to throw. And I remember being in the rain and crying. And I was so emotionally frustrated that then I couldn't throw a strike because I was just like crying as a little 12-year-old in the rain, looking at my family inside, just like looking out their window like, you got this. Yeah. And I feel like it defines so much of my athletic experience because a lot of how my parents raised me was just focused on resilience. Yep. And you
push
keep
through,
showing up.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what's going on externally. You figure it out and you make it happen.
Yeah. I think that's a really good sort of segue into what a lot of people the reason this is a very requested topic for us and something that I find myself talking to a lot of people about is what sport teaches you that a classroom never could, and for me, it is that resilience at all costs.
I love that because when you're growing up and I think you're hearing about why you need to put your kids in sports, it's always about learning teamwork and how to be coachable and how to communicate and be a leader. Inherently, those are the second order consequences for me, but I don't think that's what athletics actually taught me.
Yeah.
For me, it was so much about the resilience aspect. Yes. It was a lot about mental toughness.
Yes.
That was a big part of it. Those were almost like the primaries for me, and then everything else came with it. But the next question that we actually had to ask was, as a kid, were you expected to win? Were you just the inherent golden athlete, or were you the person that put in the reps? And it's funny because like looking back, I was always inherently, I would say, relatively athletic. I would like in my mind, that's what I was like. I was just athletic. Like things came natural to me.
Yeah, you're one of those annoying ones. I wouldn't say I was inherently athletic.
See, like that's what I've always thought. But then Malcolm Gladwell has a really fantastic book where he talks about anyone that's incredibly successful at anything, it can be boiled down to the fact that they've done 10,000 reps.
Yes.
And I think about that a lot because, my parents, again, coaching methodologies, pros or cons, maybe wouldn't recommend at all times. My mom would hate it if I missed a ball that was thrown near my ankles. Like I had this fear that the ball was gonna pop up from the dirt and hit me in the face. So what would my mom do? She would make me stand at the other side of the yard, and she would just like peg me with softballs, like just throw them back.
Yeah.
Because then I would learn.
Desensitize you from that.
I would
for
just
sure.
learn to catch them because I'd be so afraid of them hitting me. I would catch everything. So at a very young age, I had more reps than what I would say most people had. So was I actually inherently athletic, or did my parents force me to get good at something because they had me training and practicing at such a young age?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one for me because I definitely played other sports growing up as well, but the degree of my success with water skiing, I couldn't invest as much time in those other sports. So water polo, absolutely loved water polo, was strong in that during the periods of the time that I had the chance to train with that. Horse riding has been my passion sport, so I always loved that too. But with these other sports, I was up there with the other kids that were playing, but I definitely didn't put the reps in. So I think that there's an element of inherent athleticism, but certainly,
but it also translates athleticism from one sport.
Certainly, the balance that I had, and
over,
absolutely, and then understanding how my body could move, and I sort of think about it now when I drive different cars. It's I can adjust to feel that car quite quickly, and then I can adjust to how to zoom around the tracks. But
shout out to Alex.
Shout out to Alex. But the kid that people expected to win, or the kid who had to claw her way, it's funny, I would define myself as the latter, but I think it kind of depends. Growing up in South Africa, competing against the South African or other kids in Africa, I was definitely at the top.
Yeah.
But when I moved to that world stage and I was competing against the Europeans and the Americans and the kids who were homeschooling and that's all they did, or had perfect lakes and conditions and the best boat and the best equipment, I just, wow, I mean, that just was not my reality. I had to go out when it was raining, when it was, terrible conditions, because I was up at 4:00 and we're at the lake now, you best ski, or we, do your homework by the lake whilst we wait for the wind to calm down a little bit, but you best get out on the water. And so I think it really was the reps for me.
Which is I think a good segue into a little bit of this next topic is, how did that translate into success now? We both inherently were like, the first time I water skied, everyone was like, we have something, right? Natural athlete. I kind of had the same sentiment of being a natural athlete. In reality, I think what it taught me was resilience and work ethic.
Yes.
And I think that is probably one of the biggest benefits of my career success today is those two areas, and also delayed gratification. I think that's another one that comes with being an athlete. You put in so many reps, and you don't always win, but you learn that you will maybe learn or win at some point in time. Yes. It's just not always connected to the reps that you're putting in at any given moment.
Yeah, you keep betting on yourself. That's definitely a defining moment that you and I have spoken about earlier on in our careers, where we worked in incredibly tough work environments, and those maybe didn't get paid a lot of money, or we had incredibly long hours that we were just socially expected to work, and we threw ourselves into that. But wouldn't say it was maybe the happiest work period of my life, but that delayed gratification of, I'm betting on myself on this in the long term, that whilst this environment might not be the best right now, I'm learning so much, and it's going to take me to my next era. That delayed gratification of, right now it's pretty friggin' tough and I'm not loving it, but I know that this is going somewhere.
I would say that was one of the biggest benefits that I would correlate to athletics and sports.
Yes.
If you're listening in and thinking, should I put my child in athletics because of XYZ, you can put them in anything to learn how to communicate and be leaders and have teamwork. You can be in any extracurricular activity, I feel like, and pretty much pick those up. The resilience and the delayed gratification that comes from anything that requires you to put a ton of reps in, which is definitely athletics, I would say is one of the biggest benefits. I mean, to Gabi's point, when we were in that phase of life where it was just a grind, I had multiple people come up to me and say, you're going to regret working this hard. You're missing out on so many memories. All my friends at the time were living their traditional collegiate story of, being in sororities, being in frats, and I was working 2 jobs at that time. But I saw the long-term vision of what I was building, where they didn't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm willing to put in this time knowing that it's intentionally going to be this phase of life,
Yes.
which is going to set me up for success in my next phase of life. And I had that muscle in me because of my background in athletics.
And I would say that that's one of the things that is your superpower as well, is your the vision that you will define for yourself and lock into. And that might adjust a little bit over time, but you are very clear on, this is what I want down the line, and this is why I'm going through all of this to get it. I wouldn't say that I have always been as clear on my vision.
If you have not listened to our episode on Enneagrams, this is a really good time to pause and go back to that episode, which probably leads us to our next question. Let's talk about identity. Did you place your whole identity in being an athlete? When did you move away from that? When did that help? When did that hurt? And I pause. The reason I think that's a great question to ask is, if you've listened to our episode on Enneagrams, if you have not, you'll know that we do things for very different reasons. Our Enneagrams are relatively similar as a 3 and an 8, but Gabi is driven more so by the external validation that was expressed with the first time her family saw her ski and finish a course. Mine is driven from there's not a good one-liner, because if I say it's driven by control and power, that's not what it is.
But yours is always more internal. So you'll take control if someone else is not taking control. Yeah. I have a strong 8 element in me as well, but it's really more about you placing all of the chips on yourself. Yeah. And so whether that means that you need to take control into environment where I'm placing all my chips on, what are other people going to define as I'm successful? Yeah. Because, what do they define as successful? All right, I will become the chameleon of whoever I need to be in that environment. Yours is, where do I want to go? What do I want to be?
How do I get there?
How internally,
who do I need to influence to get there?
Yeah.
So close to the same, but same but different. So
different motivators. But yeah, I mean, back to that question, talking identity, it was my entire identity. Talk about a loss of self and purpose, of migrating from being a professional athlete and defining myself by the successes I'd had as an athlete to making my way in traditional job, corporate America, a workplace where I could reinvent myself because no one knew my background. I mean, I was just so used to, we sort of laughed last night when Holly said, how did you get over to America? And I said, water skiing. And I didn't see anything like glint in her eye of saying, oh, yes, I've heard about it. Because I was introduced by so many people in my family or anyone else. Everyone kind of knew about my water skiing athletics. So I didn't have to talk about that. Yeah. That was who I was. And that's what I brought to the table. And then when I didn't have that anymore, it was, what on earth
who am I?
Who am I? What do I bring to the table? What makes me happy? What am I proud about? That was it was my entire identity. Absolutely. When did it help me? I think confidence. Yeah. Betting on myself is I can do it's a pretty difficult sport. I come from this little country called South Africa, and we are not known as competitive water skiers on the main stage. We don't have all of the other training luxuries that some of the other countries did and federations. So there was huge confidence that absolutely carried through until I got through this loss of identity and then started to say, okay, I'm going to get into this world of e-commerce. And I never wanted to be a cog in the wheel. I always wanted to do something different, because for water skiing, conditions change all the time and you have to be very adaptable in that sport. So once I kind of jumped into this career where you had to be very adaptable, then I started to have a slightly different identity. But I was lost for a period, for sure.
I was lost from the change in routine. I think that was one of my biggest difficulties of...
Creature of habit you are.
Yeah, that I did not love that. I mean, when I was done, I struggled to go to games afterwards for like the first 2 years afterwards. I missed it so much. I loved it so much. I saw so much of my future being tied to it. Because when you're at that phase of life, you don't realize that it ends, really. I don't know if that's the best way. It is everything for you. They don't prepare you for what's next.
Yeah.
This is what you're doing day in and day out. So I think that part was a little bit difficult for me. And then as well as, losing that routine and having to figure out ways to drive myself in other areas of my life.
Yeah. I struggled with that a lot because a lot of mine was external, right? So I struggled with discipline actually over a period. I was so strongly disciplined because I had to for external reasons. And then when I didn't have that external reason of discipline, I floundered a little bit and would kind of go into the complete opposite, which was quite interesting because discipline is innately, it has to be within you. I was coasting, not really coasting, but I was going through this. It was forced upon me, that discipline, that training, that there's always something to be striving towards. And I kind of felt a little bit more lost with that because my Enneagram 3, again, is external, not
needing someone to impress.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is a mindset that you had to unlearn?
My sport, so coming into career and leadership and business, my sport was predominantly, it is an individual sport. So you can compete as a team and, then there's an element of that in larger tournaments and whatnot. But really, it's you at the end of the day. And I definitely had to learn success through others, which is a very tough thing when it comes to relinquishing control as well. So that perfectionism and things that you can only control what you can control in my sport, that was such a huge thing. I couldn't control what everyone else around me in a team environment, in a corporate environment. And as I started to get into leadership, I would say this has since become hopefully a strength of mine in leadership, but success through others. I want others around me to shine, and I wasn't always like that. I would be that one. I would be that one who would take charge. Often majority of the time was the captain of the international team and whatnot, because I would just very quickly take charge in those environments. And I realized that wasn't serving me particularly well right in the start of my career. I would be, maybe a team lead or whatnot, but I found there's actually so much more success and diversity of ideas and power of community through leading through others. That was a big thing that I had to change.
I would say even more so as our teams below us have grown.
Yes.
You get to this point where I preach this a lot with my team: progress over perfection. Someone else may not do it as well as you. They may not have, 10 out of 10 perfection on the project, but you cannot be the bottleneck in everything.
Yes.
So when you allow others to learn and grow and maybe do something as a 7 out of 10, and then you come in and give them the guidance that brings it to an 8.5 and 9, they're going to consistently increase their average. But that was something I struggled with in the beginning, is wanting to take charge and control too much, which put way too much on my plate. It overwhelmed me and didn't allow others to grow.
Yes.
Another area, I am adding this for DXC Tomco, if you're listening. Another area I would say I struggled with is when it came to team sports. I was basketball, softball, volleyball, so definitely team sports. I wasn't the person that, every single point was hyping everyone up, jumping on the floor, full of enthusiasm. I was the person with intense RBF and locked in, either pissed at myself or pissed at someone else, and using that as a type 8 with a lot of anger to drive me forward. And that's something that has not translated incredibly well into being a leader, is because sometimes I'm too intense.
Yeah.
And that's just my natural, that's my natural, is just high intensity. And I've realized that you don't always communicate in the best way when you lead with that intensity. So having to soften that up a little bit and learn how to communicate my life is my company and Better Media and XYZ, but it's not always others. So when I come in with that much intensity, it almost scares people away and they assume that I'm looking for perfection because of how driven I am. And I picked that up as a younger athlete in sports when I was, I was always the person like, again, that would be kind of looking at everyone like, why did you miss that? Why aren't you rebounding XYZ?
Well, that was your conditioning.
That was my
Because
conditioning.
you had that exact same language
the
training
moment
you.
I got in the car. If my dad is listening to this, anytime my dad attended a game, my stats were at least 20% worse, whether it was, runs or anything.
Mine was that fear of failure,
Yes.
100%. That was a huge mind shift that I had to.
I wouldn't get into flow state if my father was there.
Yeah.
I would be worried about him.
Everything.
Yes. Worried I'd be playing through all the Jeremy Wishon quotes in my head rather than just focusing on the ball coming my way. So that was something I had to learn how to kind of soften my presentation so that way others didn't put as much pressure on themselves as I was putting on myself. Because I can handle that pressure. I've always had that pressure.
Yes.
But when I came to others with those expectations, they didn't always have the confidence that I did. And that was something I realized I needed to build up in others in order to be a better leader, I would say.
Yeah. And that's sort of, again, why we preach that Enneagram episode. I feel we probably could go into an hour or two just chatting about that too, because that was it absolutely was that catalyst for self-development, that self-awareness. Probably not only for you, for me, it was absolutely for others, because I would get frustrated with others, not really understanding or realizing why.
Yeah.
Let's chat about the transitioning from athletics into e-commerce in particular. So we've sort of been speaking business and leadership, but e-commerce is this environment that changes at the speed of the algorithm. There's not a whole bunch of consistency when it comes to build out an SOP, a playbook, or go study this degree in university and you'll be able to get a job in this. It changes at the speed of light. Resilience is probably a big one because of that. Agility is a big one because of that. But why do you think that, certainly we've spoken about this a little bit with your company, but so many former athletes have an upper hand in transitioning into a career in e-commerce, retail media, something that we do?
I think this is a fun one. I think there are so many parallels. I was a bartender before starting Better Media, pretty much. The timeline gets a little murky there when I was doing both at the same time. But I loved bartending and serving because of how fast-paced the environment was. And it was constantly a challenge from a memorization standpoint, from a prioritization standpoint, timing when someone needs this versus someone else needing this. And that was kind of my first insight into what I was chasing or missing in athletics. It was that constant challenging environment. Mm-hmm. It was constantly changing and really fast-paced. And now I kind of fast forward into the industry I'm in today. They're really not that much different. I think for me, I was definitely chasing the competitiveness and the agility needed to be successful, which is driven by my athletic background. I was constantly in an environment of chaos and change. And that's what we see in e-com. I think we see a lot of people struggle in e-commerce coming from, traditional backgrounds because they can't keep up with the change. They need consistency. They need to show up and do the same thing every single day. You cannot be that person and thrive in e-commerce, I feel like. I mean, as Gabi mentioned, it's moving at the pace of the algorithm. The moment Amazon or Walmart or Instacart changes something, we're having to update our whole workflow in an instant. Yeah. And we're talking on a weekly basis almost. Now, yes, it's 80-20, but things change incredibly quickly. And I think that's actually it sparks that competitive drive within us to really constantly be growing and evolving. And I think that's probably for me one of the biggest things that translated from my athletic background to where I am today.
To where you are, how you run BTR, and probably hiring practices as well.
Yes, to hiring practices. The majority of our team has a D1 athletics background. It's, I think, softball, baseball, hockey at this point.
Wow.
And it's a lot of, dual sport athletes as well. And what I've loved is we've been able to hire people and just throw them in. We don't need to almost like nurture them. because they have this inherent confidence of being able to figure it out. That's something that we see a lot in the background is it's the confidence. If you're given a project and you have no idea how to do that project, if you're insecure, you're going to ask questions. If you're confident, you're going to go learn, especially when you have ChatGPT and Google. You can figure anything out on your own. So that inherent drive to figure something out, the confidence to figure it out, the willingness and work ethic to figure it out has been absolutely, I would say, one of the key accelerators in our company.
It's that self-starter mentality. So, you know, a startup company environment, both of us were in a company that was that type of environment as we got started, as well as being in e-commerce.
Go figure out how to accomplish it.
Yes. Yeah.
It wasn't, here's the playbook.
No. I had that this past year.
Wrote the playbooks.
We did. We quite literally wrote the playbooks for other companies, other people, and then tore it up and rewrote them all again probably a few months later. But I love that I'm in a large CPG organization, matrix organization right now. And I love that I still get to bring that type of energy into this type of a company. So I had that earlier on this year, actually sort of starting last year of, hey, you know, folks on my team that run our e-com strategy department, TikTok is kind of a big thing. We're maybe a few years behind on that, but saying, we've got no one who's an expert on this. Let's figure it out. And I loved the challenge of, hey, figure out what makes it successful in TikTok Shop. Become the in-house expert within like weeks, and now educate others internally. And I love that I still got to bring that type of energy into my team, because that's so fun that you get to build and create in that way. But again, athleticism sort of brought a lot of that self-starter. You've got to bet on yourself. Yeah. You've got to take the bull by the horns and teach yourself something new. Your coach can only say so many things. You have to do it at the end of the day.
You have to do it at the end of the day. And the teach yourself. I think that's a really key aspect. You know, again, growing up, when you hear the stories on why athletics is impactful, it's always teamwork. It's always like incredible teamwork. And
it wasn't that for me.
No, I think they're missing some of these fundamentals of being a self-starter.
Yeah.
You have to go practice on your own.
Yeah.
You have to do all these, you know, small things, the early wake-ups, the meals, the timing, learning prioritization when you have a ton of homework and a job as well. Yeah. Those are the areas that I think really build those fundamental habits that make someone successful later on in life.
Yes. That was definitely a lot of what, as I started to hire people as well, there wouldn't be a lot of e-commerce on resumes, right? Or, you know, actual courses that they could have done, or
we've been in a space
roles.
7 to 8 years, and we are considered the OGs in the space of e-commerce. Now, of course, e-commerce has been around for quite a bit longer, but like you said, it's so new. People don't have a resume with this.
No, and so longevity in your role, don't really care about it that much. And for what I'm looking for when I'm hiring,
it can be a negative.
It can be a negative, yes, unless they've been in a role or with a company that has changed and had to adjust, because just, you know, negotiating a contract with Amazon year over year, that's not going to give me the diversity of thought. And so that athlete mindset of being that self-starter, not having a checklist of specific things on your resume as much as how do you show up. And so every time I'm interviewing, I've got a panel of folks. I've got someone who's going to chat with an interviewee, with a candidate, about the specifics, the technicals of what's going on in that role. But when I'm interviewing, two things I'm always looking out for. It's culture, how you're going to fit into the team, but then it's how do you show up, and is that decretive to either the average of my team, or is it going to help inspire and transform how you show up and how you're going to be a self-starter? Absolutely.
It's important. It's important if you're raising children. If you are in that crossroads, I think it's incredibly amazing, all of the things that you can check off your list in terms of being a parent and what you can instill in your children that are going to make them successful later in life.
I want to deviate a little bit. It's not it is a question that you and I've been asked frequently about our friends that have kids at certain ages they're putting into sports. So it's not one that we had planned to chat about, but it's when you are introducing your kids into sport.
Ooh,
and
I know where you're going with this
yeah,
one.
To what degree do you push your kids to continue? They say, I want to pick up tennis. This is my sport du jour because my friends are playing it or whatever it may be. And then, a semester, they don't even make it the semester and they want to quit or they want to try something else. How do you find that balance between pushing your kids too hard and keeping them in a sport and teaching them that resilience?
You segmented that into 2 questions, and I want to very carefully delineate those 2 questions. One was keeping them in the sport and teaching them resilience versus pushing them too hard. Mm-hmm. 2 different topics.
Okay.
I think.
Break it down for me.
I was similar. I know DeLacy was similar. I think Dayton, my brother, went through a similar phase as well of, I don't want to play this sport. It's not fun. My mom forced us, signed us up year after year for 3 years to continue playing basketball and softball. And then fast forward, I end up absolutely loving it. I was too young to make a decision on whether or not I should continue to play. When you are a child, you do not have resilience. You do whatever makes you happy. And it's probably not going to be a new sport that is challenging you in a way that makes you uncomfortable. I think that you should force your child to play. Unless there is some scenario where it's, they're getting bullied or something in that sport. And even still, maybe you should force them to play because it's going to teach them confidence and how to deal with bullies. I think that you should force them to play to a certain level. The second part of that question is, when do you push them too hard? This has been a really fun question as we've seen this rise in traveling sports, in personal coaches at much younger ages. Mm-hmm. Kids are burning out incredibly quick. I mean, you had the baby Gronk kid go viral and supposedly get collegiate offers when he was 8 years old.
Yeah.
It's a big bet to make on someone's mental health.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think is a big struggle for athletes, is actually the mental health piece. And you can't, in my opinion, force your kid to have the passion required for them to get to the next level, especially as a female. When you look at the next level in female sports, it's really, it's the WNBA?
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not an incredible next level in female sports. Maybe for men it's worth pushing when they have the opportunity from a finaally monetizable.
Well, this is a whole nother topic about equality and pay but yes.
Yes. Yes. But I guess what I'm saying is, in order to get to that level, you have to have some level of passion in either the competitiveness.
Innate, yes.
And it has to be innate. So you can never force them in a way that's not going to burn them out if they don't already have it in themselves.
Yeah.
So don't push them too hard at that point.
I think it's monitoring. I had a lot of conversations with other collegiate athletes during my period of whilst I was in college. And that was a topic of, were you pushed too hard? Mm-hmm. And I think when it comes down to the impact on health, on body, and on mindset, and I would say mindset is something that thankfully is starting to become a lot more, or mental health and mindset becoming a lot more of less of a taboo topic. At least it was a taboo topic for me growing up, and now it's something that's far more approachable. But you certainly don't want to get to that point of where you're pushing your child's body before they've physically, developed. I might not have the severe back issues that I have right now, but I was doing a high intensity sport at a very young age before bones had literally formed. I think when it comes down to how much you're pushing that child's mindset, mental health, you can tell when you're not at the field, or you're not training as well, the demeanor of child, of pushing them through to help them experience that, hey, I'm actually really proud of myself. I didn't want to do that, but I didn't even know I was capable of that. And I think you do need some external push sometimes. Some kids might have that innate, but I would kind of question why they had that. For me, mine wasn't innate. I had a lot of drive. It was for external validation reasons,
I still struggle with this question as well. I had a high school coach Coach Pittman, if you're listening to this, who had what he called Mental Toughness Wednesdays.
Okay.
And the whole concept of a Mental Toughness Wednesday was to make you the most resilient mother effer possible. And if you didn't cry on a Mental Toughness Wednesday, you probably weren't practicing hard enough.
Okay.
It was, small things. I remember one practice, he turned up all of the speakers in the gym so loud that you couldn't hear anyone speaking. So you couldn't hear the plays he was calling, or your teammates, your point guard calling out the play. And he would make us run that drill. Every time we missed a play, either from the point guard or him, we would have to run suicides. And it was terrible. But his argument was, you need to train for the worst possible scenario, which is being in a championship game. The fans are loud and you can't perfectly hear all the plays. So it was great. That being said, a year after I graduated, I really struggled with my relationship with the sport, with my mental health. And I go back and forth on, obviously I turned out fantastic. And I'm really appreciative of all the resilience and, my parents also being as hard as they were on me. But then there were also times where I just needed support.
Yeah.
Especially at that age where I was already struggling mentally. And then you throw something as simple as a Mental Toughness Wednesday or a tough conversation with my parents after I missed a winning shot. And
was it a conversation or was it a talking to? Because mine was a talking to. I'd shut down in conflict.
I was probably crying in the back while my dad's adjusting the rearview mirror to make eye contact with me. You've been there. You know what those ones are. Yeah. And that was tough. Sometimes I don't know if it would have made me less of the person I am to have a little bit more support in those moments. Yeah. And to your point, in athletics, I learned to shut down and to shut off my emotions. So I know Coach Pittman would frequently come to me and say, I'm so much harder on you because you handle it better and it drives you. And that's because I would just shut down the emotional operating system and lock in because I was so angry on the inside. So it did make me a better athlete. But I don't know if that's healthy.
Yeah, I think it's raising kids is incredibly difficult anyway.
It's easy to F them up.
Yeah, it really is. You can over-index on something that you learned from your childhood or something like that and over-index opposite on the other side. But the toughness with resources, do you have a little bit of that safe space to sort of chat through and explain the why? So what I love that you said about Coach Pittman is music was chaotic. That was, my heart was pulsing. I'll probably figure out on my Oura ring later that I had 10 minutes of stress listening to that story, until he tied it back to, you're in a championship game. Yeah. The crowd is going crazy. You are training under these circumstances for that. Mm-hmm. That kind of why, or tying it back to a little bit more of the reasoning, that really resonated with me, because then, I would be training under horrendously tough, difficult conditions, definitely sobbing, definitely wanting to give up, but knowing that I'm purposely training under these difficult conditions. We are running the boat around in circles to make tough wakes because I'm going to go compete on one of the most difficult lakes, rivers in the world, Moomba Masters in Australia, where there's a crowd all along the sides, and it's just not your typical environment. And we are purposefully making this difficult so that you can get used to that. And I think that why, when you're communicating with that child, but also B, creating the space to have a little bit more of a two-way conversation, so that when your kid is saying, I don't want to do this anymore, okay, let's talk about why. Yeah. And maybe figure it out of, this is quite hard. Yes, well, you're going to have to go through hard things in life.
You're going to have to go through hard things in life.
Yeah. I want to bring it home to this leadership, mentorship, and a little bit of the maybe entrepreneurship side of things. You have kind of said it by already chatting about Coach Pittman, but what's a thing that a coach has said to you that lives rent-free in your head? And I've got one.
I'm going to butcher the quote.
Okay.
But it's something along the lines of, if you're wrestling a gorilla, you don't stop when you're tired. You stop when the gorilla is tired.
Yeah.
And that goes back to explaining the why and setting the context. I've ran a marathon, and I'm going to throw it out here because I had never trained for a marathon before. I had ran a 5K right after graduation. My mom convinced me to run a marathon with her.
Janelle, you've got to stop doing this to us. A 2-mile walk is not 20 miles. Stop.
Talk about PTSD and having no why.
Yeah.
She just loves it.
There's no why. She just full sends you into a full marathon.
I ran a marathon, 14 miles in. I don't know if you've heard this little piece of the story. I loved Krispy Kreme donuts.
Yeah.
And we were running by, it was a Krispy Kreme or something, and I could smell the donuts in the air, and it made me cry. And I started sobbing, and I'm like, this sucks. I hate it. My hips are in so much pain. I can't walk another step. There's donuts right there. My mom turns around and looks at me, and she's like, call your grandma and have her pick you up, because she was tired of me crying. And I was like, I'm 14 miles in. Why would I stop now?
How old were you with this? You said you just graduated.
19,
Okay.
18.
Yeah.
So she had also never ran a marathon or trained for a marathon. I want to give you that context to where the resilience and pain tolerance comes from. She wanted my grandma to come pick me up. How humbling is that? It was that comment that pushed me through to finish.
Yeah.
We ended up at 27 miles because we got lost along the way. So it was terrible. But I think it ties back to that quote, because one thing that you're consistently going to learn is life is hard. And
the job was not done. The race was not over.
The race is not over. You have to continue pushing through.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about resilience and the mindset. My body was shut down. If you've listened to any David Goggins books, he talks about this point where it's you don't think you can physically go another step. That's where I was at. My back was bleeding from the camelback I had on. I had physical salt down my leg. So I'm like in terrible condition. I finished the marathon. And it goes back to that quote. You don't stop when you think you need to stop. You stop when the environment allows you to. And I think that's a big one.
Yeah, when the job is done. Mine's a very different take on that because technically the question is a thing that a coach said to you rent-free that lives in your mind today. Mine's not that. I keep coming back to, I kept thinking about this question. I keep coming back to how you coach other people. And so this has been a little bit of my leadership journey is I would go to so many different coaches and they might give me the best ones. Let me back up and say the best coaches that really resonated with me would be the ones that would give me a piece of advice during the set whilst we're training, and they could see whether it was clicking in my brain or not. And if it wasn't, they would say it a different way.
Yeah.
And that is not something that every coach is particularly good at. Yeah. But the best ones for me always were. They would find what clicked in my brain and they would adjust. And so that has been a huge thing for people leadership for me as well, is it's not what works in my brain and it's not what works for me. It's trying to understand you better to be able to coach you in a better way. And that's sort of why you first look in when you've got performance issues with someone on your team. It's, have I truly set them up for success? And it's not always the resources of the things they've been given, but it's, have we tried to understand their perspective, how they need to understand something? And I had a coach, two coaches that really stuck with me. I have many throughout the years of different periods of where I was at, but I would say my mindset coach was this guy, Chet Raley. He got me onto this book, I think by Gary Mack, Mind Gym. And a lot of that was not just mental toughness, but learning your brain, your mindset, and visualization. That's not something, again, I was doing it for external validation. I was not going through this in my brain. That whole era of my water skiing career, that was towards the end of it, was a lot of it was mind games. Yeah. That coach was phenomenal in helping me by speaking different languages to me to see what would resonate. And so it wasn't necessarily one thing that a coach said, but it was the approach that he consistently took that I think has just made him one of the best coaches in the world, like a life coach type of a scenario. It's when your sport coach becomes your mindset coach. And that's probably something I'll always continue to strive to be as a leader, as a mentor of others, but understanding where are you at and speak in your language and adjust according. Yeah. That's servant sort of leadership of it.
I saw a really great quote the other day. It was like, in order to give someone directions, you need to know two things: where they are at on a map and
Yes.
where they want to go.
Yes.
And you think that's easy. You need to plug into ways. Here's where I am. Here's where I'm trying to go. But you can see how it relates
Yes.
to everything else in life of what point are they in? How do you need to communicate this so they understand and you can get them to where they're trying to go?
I love that. That's come up for me actually when we do our 2025 reflection and our 26 goal setting and whatnot, is very much you can't work on that vision if you don't know where you are right now. And so I saw a really great prompt of, scroll back through your photos, remind yourself through everything you've gone through month by month this year, and where are you
Mel
right
Robbins
now?
video.
Yes, it was Mel Robbins. And actually fully grounding yourself. Where's my starting point?
Yep.
It sounds very simple, but for someone like me who can go through the motions so often,
you often let
forces me.
others set the here's where I'm trying to go,
Yes.
which makes it difficult because then you're like, wait, no, actually, I don't want to go there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So we talk pretty frequently that the reason we started Coffee Commerce Cabernet is because we wanted to be the podcast we wish we had when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
How would you portray everything you've learned and all the growth you had through athletics? Is there anything you'd go back to your younger self and maybe communicate differently?
I think, getting a little bit emotional, I think that I would do my best to figure out my part in it. I'm trying to figure out the best way to articulate this because I did so much for approval of others, but that there was so much that I could be proud of myself. Yeah. And I wasn't proud of myself. It was, I'm going to get the pat on the back. And I think I fast forwarded and I missed a lot of experience as well because I kept going for that next thing. It was almost like a hit. There was never enough approval, success, worthiness that tied back to it. And for me, it would be very much, I wish I would have reflected more. Yeah. And I was given tools of journaling and write back on how the set was. And I would write the set, my training history, but I wouldn't say how it felt. I wouldn't reflect back because feelings and doing things with your body, that's what really resonates with you. Not it was a 15-minute set. I ran through these lines, blah, blah, blah. I would just do things to sort of trigger a memory of what I did in that set, not how I felt, what I could have learned, something's kind of different from that. And so all of that would have been for myself instead of for others. And I was very much going through the motion for others. So that would be my thing.
If we're playing this for younger Gabi, it's not something she learned until a few years ago, I would say. The first time Gabi spoke on the largest stage in Amazon, she walked off the stage and I was like, are you going to reflect on the fact that you just crushed your first speaking engagement on the largest Amazon stage? She looks at me and said, what one are we doing next? And
I don't even remember that, but that's 100% what I would have said.
And I said, I need you to spend 60 seconds thinking about it. And she said, I'm okay. And walked off.
Yeah.
That's all she did. And I was so frustrated because I'm sitting here like incredibly proud of my best friend who just walked on stage, absolutely crushed it. And I know how she is and how she moves the goalpost. And I'm like, you need to reflect on this. And she goes, I'm okay. And turns her back.
Yeah, because I would honestly, it's the muscle I have to learn to flex the most to this day. I now perhaps spend a bit more time reflecting. It is incredibly uncomfortable for me to do. Yeah. Absolutely. I hope that's probably going to go in my 25 video of when I watch it back in 3 years' time of how uncomfortable I still sort of feel reflecting because I don't really know the why. Maybe that's a whole nother episode, but reflecting a lot more would be my thing.
That's a big one. We've talked about this a little bit when it comes to 2026 planning, and I think it relates to this topic as well of kind of my childhood. Is my word for the year is intentionality, doing things with intention and not letting life just pull me along. Because that's something you get caught up in and the competitiveness and the craziness of the industry. You just say yes to everything. And if I think about that and how it relates to athletics and childhood, I didn't always have the why either. It was, I was doing things because someone told me to show up for practice. And I think if I would have had a better job of being intentional and understanding the outcome I was trying to achieve, it's easier for me to understand now. I don't know if it's just something that maybe hasn't developed in your childhood because you're so used to just doing what everyone else around you says.
Yeah.
But I think if I was to replicate that experience or to raise a child, that's something I would focus on, is being intentional and almost over communicating why we're doing certain things. So that way they can understand, they can build that innate passion inside of them rather forcing them to go through the motions of it.
Yes. Yes. And that's team building today as well, is bring people along for the why. Get them to believe and understand the why, and then bring them along, because there's going to be detours along the way. And if you're just giving out a directive, you're not going to get that person to be able to adjust in the mindset that you have and that vision that you have. Absolutely.
And that's something that's been really cool, I would say, about our journeys and why we've connected how we have is when we first started working together, we were both like ICs. We were individual contributors pretty much. Like we had teams, but we were still very much like get your hands dirty, figure it out.
HOKIC.
HOKIC.
Hands on keyboard, individual contributor. Got it.
We just did things. And, you know, fast forward over the last 4 years, we've both grown exponentially. Our teams have both grown exponentially, where it got to the point where you had to start making a decision. Do I sign up for this task or do I teach someone else? Because we had too much on our plate. And that's where we've really grown into, I think, being better communicators with our team, setting intention, setting the vision, so that way others can really buy in and help build with us.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's such a passionate topic for us, because we have expedited that growth and evolution over the last few years, considering where we were when we first got connected.
Yeah. It's conversations like this. The reason we've got the podcast we wish we had when we were getting started is to have these types of conversations. Because certainly for me, who didn't spend a lot of time reflecting, you are my mirror. You are the one who holds me accountable to know, hang on, pause on what you've just achieved for a second, and not that it's for someone else, that it is for you and it's for yourself. But
if I tell her that there's an espresso martini along with the journey, she usually does a much better job of reflecting. So pro tip, if you have a friend who really struggles to reflect, give them an espresso martini, sit them down at a table, do not disturb, and then talk them through the process.
Figure out what their why is. There you go. My why is an espresso martini, but hopefully not after 6 p.m. because that's...
We are too old for that now. We have recently realized.
Yes. No, cannot have late caffeine. I don't know how I did it beforehand. So, you know, let's wrap things up a little bit. We would love to hear from the rest of you. You know, what if you were an athlete and that's a period that you were transitioning out of being an athlete into whatever your new role is, corporate world, brand building world, whatever it may be, you know, what is that one trait that you think really carried across? For us, this is something that we've spoken about. We hear a lot. It's teammates, it's collaboration, it's that sort of leadership. It wasn't that for me. It wasn't that for you either. So what was it for you?